Ladies, gentlemen, and Spiritborn of all ages, there are a ton of skills on this class that are really cool looking and interesting functionally too. But if you want to truly hit the highest heights that the class can reach, you will generally find yourself in one main archetype. The Rod of Kepeleke unique weapon paired with the core skill and intensely cycling just maximum resource spending and barrier generation as a result of a rune word. For the most part, the strongest versions of all of these also involve the Banished Lord's Talisman to force an overpower on every hit as a result of the combo too. But that isn't the case with all of them, and some of them are actually even capable of competing on a very high level even without this. And so today I want to talk about one of my favorite Spiritborn skills in the game, Payback, and how I've maximized it to the point of doing tier 120 pits in less than 8 minutes with imperfect gear and properly feed farming on 115s and below. So the ceiling of this build is quite a bit higher than I've managed to reach so far, but I'm enjoying the hell out of it being a different sort of basis of powers stuck together to make this happen. As far as why you would play this Kepeleke type build over the others, it is pretty much just as fast as Crushing Hand with the ability to teleport all over the place by just holding down the Payback button and mousing over your target anywhere on the screen. It gets the Vortex tech that we can use in most builds now with the Shroud of False Death, where you can stack what is essentially 3 Vortex charges per use by using Vortex, then using your ult, then getting a free cast Vortex which also refreshes the cooldown on Vortex as well. This makes up for the only negative of Payback itself, which is that the radius is relatively small, which means if you group things up using Vortex, that just isn't a problem anymore. The other main difference is that while Payback has less hits per cast, it is capable of hitting much larger individual numbers with each cast than my similar gear does in my Crushing Hands build. So while the speed farming rate is pretty similar, this just has larger individual crazy pops of damage, which I think is something that a lot of people do enjoy seeing on the screen. And it has the bonus of achieving this without using Banished Lords or Overpower procs, which just tingles my brain as a build creator because after all, once that tech was discovered, I honestly didn't think there would be any builds that could compete without using it. So today I present to you the pure crit Payback with armor stacking, which I like to call the Golden Fist Spiritborn build, coming along with a cool, unique visual where you smash enemies between your pair of Spirit Gorilla fists. This also takes advantage of the Shroud of False Death, mostly for the +1 ranks to all passive and the massive power that offers, as well as the Harlequin Crest Mythic 2 to help with our goals of armor stacking and also give us some other damage benefits too. So keep those in mind as we start off here by diving into your skill tree, as obviously they'll make it look like we have a bunch of bonus skill ranks, but I'll tell you where we actually put all of our points. For your basic skill cluster, it completely just does not matter where you put them. We don't use a basic skill, so just stick 2 points somewhere in here so we can move on to the core cluster. Here we'll just be taking passives, 1 rank of the Vigorous passive for some bonus resource generation after you cast a core skill. Combined with the bonus rank from the Mythic chest, this gives us a pretty decent boost to our resource generation. We then take 3 ranks of Balanced Exertion for 15% bonus core skill damage in exchange for increased cost, but the negative part of this doesn't really affect us, especially with Payback in the way that it works. After that we move on, and here we'll be picking up Vortex, its enhancement, and then also Measured Vortex, in total giving us a large radius pull-in effect for enemies nearby, stacking the enemies directly in front of us so they all get hit by Payback. This also boosts the damage of the skill that follows its use, and does bonus damage and knocks down enemies if you have a barrier, which we always do. We then pick up Ravager as another skill, as well as its enhancement, and then also Measured Ravager. Altogether, this gives us an extra hit to any of our attacks, and this will count as Jaguar skill damage, which is important. It extends its duration each time that you get a kill with this active, and it also makes our core skills, which means Payback for this build, jump to enemies whenever you cast them, and gives us 30% bonus resource generation while active too, which helps us reach our stage of infinite casting a full resource spent core skill. Here we then take some passives as well, 1 rank of Focal Point for mostly just a gateway for 3 ranks of the Apex passive. This is bonus damage to vulnerable enemies, doubled against elites and bosses. We also get some side benefit from the free rank of Diminishment from the bonus chest for just some bonus damage reduction from vulnerable enemies too. We take 1 rank of the Mirage passive, mostly just as a gateway to let us take 3 ranks of Unrestrained Power for bonus damage while unstoppable or unhindered. We are permanently unstoppable, so this is just extremely solid and consistent as a damage bonus. After that we'll be moving on to the defensive cluster of skills. Here we pick up 4 ranks specifically of Armored Hide. This is just the exact specific amount that lets me cast this with my gear breakpoint and have it active consistently without having to play around the free cast from the Intricacy passive, so I can instead save those for more Vortexes or Scourge, and staying at 100% uptime on this skill is very important to achieve. We take its enhancement and then also Reinforced Armored Hide. Altogether, when activated, you fill up to your maximum resolve stacks, you get bonus thorns, you get 100% bonus block chance while it's active, which stacks on top of regular block chance, and you get a bunch of bonus blocked damage reduction per close enemy 2 while it is active. We then pick up counterattack as a skill 2, which importantly does not go on your skill bar. We only want the passive effect, which still works even without the skill on our bar because we use a unique ring that gives us the passive effect just sort of, well, passively. The main reason that we use this is for the reinforced enhancement, which gives us bonus critical damage per close enemy. The entire rest of the skill is actually a negative for us, if anything. This part just makes it worth having passively. Then we pick up Scourge as an actual ability, as well as its enhancement, and also Adaptive Scourge. The most important parts of this is that it slows and fears enemies that it hits. It gives you a stacking buff up to 50% bonus damage to crowd-controlled enemies each time that it deals damage, and it also gives you a lucky hit chance to lifesteal 35% of the damage that you do against enemies poisoned by this skill, which is very, very large for our actual regeneration purposes. We also take some passives here, 1 rank of Endurance, mostly just as a gateway for 3 ranks of Perseverance, which gives us bonus damage reduction per stack of Resolve that you have. We then have some pretty fun bonuses here from the singular rank boost to passives that we get from the Shroud of False Death, a free 10% block chance we wouldn't have otherwise, and that converts into bonus damage as well as some free poison resistance, which is great because we are uncapped on resistances, including poison, and bonus healing received, which is just always great, and it's a free part of this too. Then we have our potency cluster, and here we're going to be picking up all 5 ranks of Payback, as well as an enhancement which makes it do more damage to an enemy every time they do damage to you before it hits, so this stacks up quite a bit in longer fights. And then Poised Payback, which not only makes this count as a core skill and thus interact with our Kepaleke combo goodness, removing the cooldown as well, but also makes it gain damage per point of resource spent when you use this. This does actually properly double up now with how Kepaleke works, especially after some fixes to this interaction in patch 2.0.3, and so when it spends your full maximum resource, it not only gets the full bonus crit multiplier from Kepaleke itself, but it also scales the full damage bonus for the Poised Payback enhancement too, which synergizes these two effects together, multiplying your damage by a significant amount, and that's why we hit such massive numbers even without having overpowers in this build. As for the obvious question of why don't we use the Banished Lord's Talisman, the answer is for Payback specifically, it is a better build without it. The main reason for that is that it seems bugged to not register the full resource spent from Payback fast enough to count for the next hit, whereas for Quill Volley and Crushing Hand, if you spend 275 resource in a single hit through Kepaleke, it instantly affects the next hit for Banished Lords. For Payback, it registers a proc of 25 spent in between, so it actually only makes you overpower every second hit, and while overpowering every hit is a hard thing to power past through other gear choices, overpowering 50% of the time is actually very easy to surpass and improve upon, so we do so by removing Banished Lords and replacing it, and the build becomes stronger as a result. We then pick up all 3 ranks of the Resilient passive over here. We have full bonus ranks of this on our pants as well from Tempering, and this gives us a load of bonus maximum life, which scales both our tankiness and also our damage through the Viscous Shield Paragon node and the bugs going on with that are quite clearly known at this point, honestly. We also are going to be taking 3 ranks of the Dominant passive for bonus damage to knock down enemies with Guerrilla skills, which we frequently cause because of Vortex, and this also importantly counts for staggered bosses too. This also gives us an execute chance with all Guerrilla skills as well. We then take 3 ranks of the Potent passive for a stacking damage debuff to enemies, which makes them take more damage from us the more time they are hit by Jaguar skills. On top of Ravager applying stacks itself that naturally count as Jaguar skill damage, we also stack this with every attack that we do due to using Jaguar main Spirit Hall, which adds Jaguar skill tag to all of our skills, and I also have bonus ranks of this on my amulets, and it's one of the best options to have for that, and that's why mine is stacked so high and gives such a massive bonus at full stacks, up to 100% bonus damage. We also then take 3 ranks of the Furnace passive here for bonus critical damage with Jaguar skills for each stack of ferocity that we have. Then we take 3 ranks of the Vehemence passive for bonus damage with potency skills at the cost of longer cooldowns for them. With the Kepaleke and core switches for Payback through Poised Payback, it does not actually have a cooldown at all, so this is purely a damage increase because it does still count as a potency skill, and it's a pretty solid damage increase at that too. Then we have our ultimate skill cluster, and here we're going to be taking the Hunter as our ultimate, as its enhancements as well, most importantly giving us 100% increased damage to injured enemies while active, as well as setting us to 4 stacks above our maximum ferocity, which makes us sit at 12 stacks for 60% bonus attack speed whenever this caps out, which is just lovely. Then we also have the part of this ultimate that gives it the ability to reset its own cooldown if you get kills while it's active, which is really good for activating our passives too. Here we're going to be taking 3 ranks of Resolution for bonus damage to elites and bosses after you cast an ultimate. This effect is also doubled if there is only 1 enemy nearby, which mostly just applies to when you're doing boss fights. We then take 3 ranks of Spiritual Attunement for bonus maximum resource. This translates to bonus damage both through Kepeleke's effect itself and through the poised payback enhancement too. Then we also take 3 ranks of supremacy as a passive. This gives us a stacking damage buff for every kill that we get during an ultimate's active time, as well as giving us 5 bonus stacks when an ultimate ends, before it starts to decrease by 1 stack per second. Part of our use of the ultimate that we have is so we can take advantage of the last part of this, the bonus stacks on the end of an ultimate, and just keep stacking the bonus 5 at the end, in single target combat even, and with our key passive, we can keep ourselves at high stacks of this, even if there's only one target we're fighting and nothing is actively dying. Another important note here is the intricacy passive here, which we get 1 free rank in because of the mythic unique chest that we have equipped. This is actually super useful to have 1 rank in, as with purposeful gameplay choices, you can use this to basically get 3 Vortex cast each time that the skill comes off cooldown, which lets you then group enemies up very easily into large clumps, and then our final skill point will be going into our key passive, which for this build is of course going to be Prodigy's Tempo. This works very well with Kepeleke focused builds. Payback is not only a basic skill thanks to Kepeleke, but it is also a core skill thanks to its enhancement, and it is a potency skill by default. So whenever you cast this skill 3 times in a row, which we do all the time, you both increase all of your skill ranks by 2 and also reduce all of your skills cooldowns by an amount that scales with their skill ranks. This means because we have the Harlequin crest as well, all of these cooldown reductions are even more potent than they normally would be. Past that, we're going to be talking about our Spirit Hall choices for the build. For primary Spirit Hall, you want to go with Jaguar, and this is just an extremely strong Spirit Hall choice due to a certain double dipping effect going on that seems to be scaling very ridiculously due to the Viscous Shield Paragon node bug. This scales off of the damage that you do to enemies to begin with, but seemingly the pop itself also then gets boosted by various multipliers a second time. And that's why you will always see the biggest numbers that Spiritborn hits be white numbers rather than crits or overpowers. It's because the white number is this pop, which cannot then also crit or overpower further. Then for the secondary Spirit Hall, we'll be taking the Gorilla for the bonus maximum resolve stacks and permanent unstoppable effect that this gives us, as well due to our gameplay style, though we do already get pretty much permanent unstoppable anyways. Jaguar Spirit Hall is also acceptable for your secondary, but unless you are right on the cusp of an attack speed breakpoint where the extra 5% from 1 more stack of ferocity would make the difference, then Gorilla is honestly just better within this build. Moving on then, we have our gear, starting with our 2 mythic uniques for the build. Our chest is the Shroud of False Death. This comes with all stats on it, which helps us hit our Paragon node requirements for the double bonuses. It has a ton of maximum life as an affix, which is great for scaling the Viscous Shield bug. Yes, it's a bug, but it's part of Spiritborn right now, and so we all have to work around its existence. The resource generation is a nice affix to have on this too, but then the rest of the chest piece is mostly irrelevant, honestly, outside of the implicit effect, which is the bonus 1 rank to all passives, which is absolutely insane, which I feel like I did probably drive home pretty well in the skill tree section. This just has an incredibly large effect on us, not only pure damage and survivability gain, but important utility like the Vortex free casts all come because of this chest piece. You can play the build without it, but it is basically just a shell of itself and what it can become unless you have this equipped. As far as greater affix and masterworking priority for this piece, if you have multiple to choose from, it is fully on maximum life, all maximum life. Scale the maximum life on this as high as you can. Nothing else is anywhere close to as important on this equipment piece. Then we have our helmet, which is going to be the Harlequin crest. Not only is this 20% damage reduction and plus 4 ranks to all skills, which is great for plenty of reasons, but it also has a nice large pile of maximum life bonus on it, which is fantastic for us. It has cooldown reduction, which is great in general. It has maximum resource, which directly scales our damage up in 2 separate ways, and then it has a massive pile of flat armor bonus, which then scales incredibly well through our setup to become a massive damage bonus as well. Like the Shroud of False Death, you can run this build without the mythic helmet here, but it is just much weaker without it. Specifically, if you aren't using this, I would recommend completely changing out our ring legendary, but I will get into more detail on the options for that when I get to the legendaries themselves. As for greater affix and masterworking procs on Harlequin crest, the ideal spread would be greater affix maximum life, 2 maximum life masterworking procs, and then 1 armor masterworking proc to bump that just a little bit. For now, let's move on to the regular uniques in the build. For the weapon, we have Kepeleke, of course, which is absolutely required. This has some fantastic stats on it, but more importantly than any of that is the unique effect itself. This makes core skills also count as basic skills, and then lets you cast them for free without any cost unless you are at maximum resource. If you are, it spends all resource, turns it into a guaranteed critical hit, and then gives you a bonus 3% critical damage multiplier for every point of resource consumed in this way. This is part of why we stack maximum resource as a stat to begin with, as the value of this conversion rate is absolutely incredible, especially with it doubling up with poised payback, similar effect, triggering at the same time. time. As for greater affix and masterworking procs, after the recent fixes to the chance to hit twice affix that happened in 2.0.3, the ideal greater affix is chance to hit twice, and maximum resource is your second priority. For masterworking procs, ideally all would be on chance to hit twice too, with again maximum resource being a good second priority if any happen to land there. Above all else though, you do really want a high roll on the effect itself, the unique effect. The difference between even a 2.6% roll and a 3% roll can be up to a 120% difference in end damage bonus if you're able to hit like 300 maximum resource, which we absolutely can, by the way, and I do. Then for our last unique, we have the Ring of the Midnight Sun. This gives you up to 50% of the resource that you've spent over the last 2 seconds whenever you get a critical hit. We combine this with a big pile of resource generation bonus to the point that when this triggers, it gives us back 100% of the resource spent instead of just 50%. So every time the proc from Kepaleke full consumes all of our resource, then gives you a guaranteed crit immediately. It then instantly refunds the full resource spent, which lets us indefinitely proc this effect over and over and over again for massive damage boosts as a result. The most important part of this ring by far though is the actual unique effect. 50% makes it reliable, but especially with the Shroud of False Death chest piece having resource generation on it, you can live with rolls as low as 44% on the ring, as long as the rest of your gear is decently well upgraded. Outside of that, the priority for greater affixes and masterworking is dexterity, above crit damage, above cooldown reduction. Then we have our legendaries for the build, and this is where things start to get a little bit more interesting. On our amulet, we have the Fell Soothsayer's aspect. This was recently found to have interesting double dipping effects with different parts of Spiritborn's kit. The long and short of this is using this aspect over a different damage aspect lowers your upfront damage and single target damage a fair bit, but it can let you absolutely delete a pack of enemies in seconds like a chain of dominoes falling over once the first one dies. This also can affect boss fights if there is even a single or even 2 adds within the fight. That's all it takes to make this have a really big impact. The best reason I can think of this having the impact that it does is if an enemy dies to the big hit of Jaguar Spirit Hull, it will then echo through this aspect that big hit to all nearby enemies. If multiple enemies die to that same effect, it then echoes a number of these massive pops to multiple nearby enemies. If you then were able to trigger the Jaguar Spirit Hull effect fast enough again for all of these pops to have happened in the last half a second, it will factor that damage into the new Jaguar Spirit Hull pop, and that theoretically is why I can hit for over 100 trillion damage on occasion, despite having, again, not perfect gear. That said, this amulet is about a 9 out of 10 for what you want here, really. Greater affix armor percentage is almost a requirement to make this work in our current setup the way that we have things organized, as this is what lets us scale to super high armor numbers. This enables our next legendary choice here too. Attack speed we need a ton of, so amulet is a great place for that too, though maximum life isn't the end of the world either instead of this, as we scale incredibly well with maximum life bonuses. Then your third slot for affixes would ideally be a bunch of ranks to a damage increasing passive. The best option will be a bit different depending on what content you are specifically wanting to do. For speed farming and content where you want upfront damage the most, the Apex passive for vulnerable enemy damage or unrestrained power passive for bonus damage while unstoppable are the best options. But for pushing higher tier pits, Potent, which is what I have here, is ideal, as this offers up to 10% bonus damage per rank, and it's important to note that your upfront damage is so high from the rest of the kit that it's honestly better to go for Potent than anything else here if you really do have the choice, but it just requires a lot more stacking and longer encounters before you will start to feel the difference of how strong this passive is. As for tempering on the amulet, mine is a little bit out of whack, but I can't really swap out this amulet because the rest of the rolls are just way too good. We have resource cost reduction, which is absolutely good. It is a damage increase because of the way that the game calculates both the poised payback enhancement and the Kepaleke bonuses. Essentially, it makes it treat them as using this percentage as more resource being spent every time that you cast it because it uses all of your resource, even counting this reduced cost, which means that it's super solid because it does add damage. But then my other temper should be bonus maximum stacks of resolve. This would result in both more damage and more survivability if I had it. The masterworking priority then on this is mostly on the passives if you get an actual good passive. Otherwise, if not, then you want to use them all on the maximum resolve stacks temper. After that, we have our ring, on which we have the unyielding hits aspect. This makes your weapon damage itself scale up and be increased by a portion of your armor. Specifically, my roll is 28% of my armor gets converted into bonus weapon damage. With incenses applied, I go up to around 5200 armor. 28% of that is just under the 1500 bonus weapon damage limit from this aspect. This is an absolutely massive damage increase, and this aspect combined with the increased synergy of poised payback is what lets this build be anywhere close to competitive with the Banished Lord's builds, even without having been Banished Lords, and I find that to be pretty cool, honestly, personally. That said, there are some considerations at this point. I can only have this aspect on my ring because of the specific point of armor that I am at myself. If you have worse gear than me, if you have lower armor numbers, then you will need to move this to your amulet so the conversion rate is higher and you get the full bonus, as this is very important to hit. This would then move the Fell Soothsayer aspect down to the ring. However, if you do not have the Harlequin crest, I actually wouldn't recommend using unyielding hits in the first place, really, and you would instead really want to use the Moonrise aspect for bonus attack speed and basic skill damage. But this is the ideal placement of these aspects if your gear reaches the armor breakpoints that you need to do so, including having the Harlequin crest. And it's worth noting, this does become easier if you have better aspect rolls on unyielding hits than I have too, because mine is not maximum. As for the affixes, you want Lucky Hit Chance to apply Vulnerable. This is our main consistent source of applying the Vulnerable debuff. It is very important to get. We can apply it through the Fell Soothsayer aspect in the part of that does this, but that has much less relevance in any sort of speed farming scenario, so it's much better to just have this affix on the ring as well. It doesn't need a greater affix or masterworking, just the raw affix does the full job that you need. After that, you want maximum life and attack speed with priority on maximum life. For tempering, you want basic skill damage instead of the overpower damage roll that I have. Then you want resource generation to help our unique ring refund more resource whenever it procs. For masterworking, you pretty much want it all to proc on the maximum life, though attack speed is not bad at all either and eases some of the other requirements too. Then on our gloves, for the final offensive aspect that we have, we use Redirected Force. This converts all of your block chance into a bonus critical damage multiplier, which is doubled if you successfully block, which we do very frequently due to having high block chance. This is one of the buggier interactions for Spiritborn. It converts block chance that is even above 100%, so this can be worth hundreds of percent more crit damage when you build around it, which of course we do because it is a thing that it exists. On the gloves themselves, you want ranks to core skills as an affix, you want attack speed and maximum life, with the ideal greater affix and masterworking proc actually being maximum life, with attack speed being secondary. For tempers, you want increased vortex size to help us round up groups of enemies, and then bonus basic skill damage. After that, we have our pants with the interdiction aspect. This gives you bonus block chance per resolve stack that you have. We have 10 resolve stacks maximum as a base, but this can go up to 20 or higher if you get the right amulet temper and masterworking procs. So this can go from 150% bonus block chance to even 300% or higher. Every bit of that then funneling into the redirected force aspect for even more critical damage multiplier to stack on top. The ideal affixes on your pants are maximum life, basic skill ranks, and then flat armor increase. The best greater affix on this piece is maximum life, and the ideal tempers are ranks to the resilient passive for bonus maximum life when you cast gorilla skills, and then barrier generation to help us keep 100% of our maximum life as a barrier constantly. With the masterworking procs, ideally all going on increased resilient ranks like I have on my pants here. Then finally we have our boots with the duelist aspect. This increases maximum ferocity stacks and thus increases our attack speed bonuses from the hunter being used very frequently. This lets us just sort of mash stuff into paste even quicker, especially as this adds to the crit damage bonus from the furnace passive too. On your boots for affixes, you want maximum life bonus, armor, and dexterity as your affixes, with armor and maximum life being equal priority for greater affix and your masterworking procs depending on how your armor levels are shaking out. If you need more armor to reach the proper conversion rate for unyielding hits, you want to aim for more bonus armor procs as a result. If you have reached the conversion limit, instead you want to aim for maximum life as a bonus. For tempering, you want more barrier generation, and then just pure movement speed bonus is the other option. Moving on to the gems and runewords in this build then, for everything outside of pushing the highest pit tiers you are comfortable doing, you probably want skulls in your jewelry to help reach the point for unyielding armor conversion. If you reach this conversion rate without this, which is the ideal spot to reach like I have here, then you can actually instead use all of these slots to help out with your resistances and sorting those out. We still don't reach resistance cap even with this, but it simply is unnecessary to do so with Spiritborn because we are tanky enough due to the barrier generation and attack speed combined with our maximum life stacking and the other defensive attacks that Spiritborn naturally has. However, the higher that you can get this, the easier it is anyways. For armor gems, you want to fully use amethyst for barrier generation, and then for your rune words, we use Pock Q for Earthen Bulwark invoked every time that we spend 300% of our maximum resource. This is essentially every 3 payback casts with the way that the build works. Then we have Zolzal in our legs for 20% bonus maximum life every time that we invoke a skill from another class twice. This equates to being every 6 casts of payback the way that the build works, so this stays permanently active. Past this, we have our mercenary choices as well, and your primary mercenary should be right here. If your resistance situation is not dire, then you want to go down the left side for both bonus armor, which helps with reaching the sort of rate that you need for unyielding hits, and the consistent damage multiplier that you get get over here from enemies that Rahir has taunted. If you are instead needing to use the unyielding hits on Amulet and are overcapped on the conversion rate as a result, you can instead go down the right path here for the bonus to all element resistance passive here instead, and the slightly less reliable multipliers, but they are still damage multipliers, so it's pretty good to have anyways. Then we'll be taking Variana as our reinforcements, and since one of our goals is 100% attack speed in bracket 1, we do not take Variana's attack speed bonus skill as it would overcap us. Instead, we're going to be taking Earthbreaker over here for a pretty consistent knockdown that she can apply, and make this cast when we use Payback for just more knockdown action, which scales well with our setup, with our passives, and also some Paragon stuff too. On which note, finally for our setup, we do of course have the Paragon board itself, with the caveat being that in Season 6 onwards, no one will have the exact same Paragon points as anyone else really at any given point, or at least it's very unlikely. So if you have less Paragon points than me, you want to aim mostly for the legendary nodes that I get, and the glyph sockets along the way so that you can get the full sort of path. Then you need to worry about the rest after that. If you have more points than I do, then your priority would be getting any easy to grab magic nodes within the radius of your glyph sockets, and then just filling out any of the glyphs that give additive damage per stat purchase in the radius, like the Spirit glyph or the Colossal glyph. Then filling out the radius around Headhunter glyph finally. From the starting board then we go up and around through to the glyph socket itself like so, and inside of here we put the Colossal glyph. This increases the damage that you do with gorilla skills and has a secondary bonus that increases damage per resolve stack that you have. This actually stacks incredibly well for a glyph multiplier, especially if you get bonus maximum resolve stacks on your amulet like I ideally would do but don't have myself right now. We then get the strength to activate this effect within the radius, and then the nearby relevant rare magic nodes as well. Then we pop out of the top of the board, onto which we'll be attaching Viscous Shield. We head left and up through the damage reduction wall barrier, rare magic nodes over here, which are quite good for us, and then head up to the actual legendary node itself. This is probably the most singularly bugged part of Spiritborn. I've broken it down a lot in recent videos, so I won't go into too much depth on it here, but this is intended to give you a maximum bonus of 33.3% bonus damage when you have a barrier for your full maximum life count. Instead, it seems to scale off of the base life number, so every point of maximum life you have over like 400, and any barrier that you have past that point as well, scales this effect above its theoretical cap at a sort of exponential rate, to the point that with 12,000 maximum life, this is giving you nearly 1000% bonus damage instead of, 33.3% its intended cap. We also go a fair bit past 12,000 maximum life in active combat, so this is a very big deal, but as long as this exists like this, we do sort of have to build around it if we want to make our build feel relevant. We then go and grab the rare and magic armor and max life nodes in the top left, before wrapping around to get to the glyph socket itself, inside of which we'll be putting the outmatch glyph. This increases the effect of all the rare nodes within the radius, which are quite good within this radius too, including damage while you have a barrier and critical strike damage, both which of course are very relevant to our build if you've been paying attention. It also has an additional bonus of letting you deal increased physical damage to non-elite enemies and also bosses. This is quite important because this is quite important because the fact that this doesn't affect regular elites isn't a big deal due to our Fell Soothsayer aspect sort of making up for that. After this, you want to grab the amount of strength required to activate this within the radius. Then we go on to the right and we attach on the sapping board like so. You want to go up and right through the resistance to all elements and maximum life rare and magic nodes, over through the resource generation and maximum resource rare and magic nodes, then to the legendary node itself. What this does is give you a buff that increases your damage by 30% for 5 seconds every time you cast 3 skills of the same base guardian in a row. We are consistently casting Payback, just sort of spamming it, which means you will often cast it more than 3 times in a row, at least once every 5 seconds, so this is just a permanently active effect. The restoration for Vigor is cool, but it's not all that required for the rest of our setup. Then we move over to the glyph socket itself, heading through the rare magic nodes on the board because they're sort of just all good, and then in this glyph socket we'll be sticking Menagerist. What this does is give you an increase to all of the magic nodes within the radius, which is extremely important because this is some of our most important magic nodes that we have in our entire Paragon board, which is bonus maximum resource. As a default, these are +4 maximum resource for each of these magic nodes, but with the full effect of the fully upgraded glyph, this makes them +15 maximum resource each, which, fun fact, gives you more than the upgraded rare node right beside them, which only gives you 8 even if you have the double bonus, so this is quite potent. Not to mention the secondary bonus of the glyph also makes it when you deal damage with each base guardian spirit on a skill, it will increase all damage you deal by 4% for 10 seconds, stacking once per spirit. This means if you cast 1 skill from each base spirit once per 10 seconds, you get a full 16% bonus to damage. bonus to your damage. We do this, so this is a consistent 16% damage bonus. Then after that, we're going to be heading up and right off of the viscous shield board itself, and now we'll be attaching on the revealing board like so, and heading right over to the actual legendary node itself. This gives you a lucky hit chance to knock down vulnerable enemies, and also gives you 30% increased damage against enemies that are crowd controlled, so this is quite effective. Then you want to go up this tree here and grab the attack speed, rare and magic nodes within the vicinity, and then also the armor increasing rare and magic nodes too, because this helps us reach our required armor. Then we go back over to the sapping board and exit at the top side this time to attach on the infighter board. We go around through the rare and magic nodes that gives you maximum life and all element resist over to the legendary node itself, which gives you bonus attack speed and damage every time you dodge or block an attack. We have consistently over 100% block chance, which means that we will block every attack, which means we'll always have the full damage bonus from this active, as well as the attack speed. So this ends up being about 18% bonus attack speed and 9% bonus damage just consistently. Then we go up through the middle of the board, through the block chance and all element resist rare magic nodes, over to the glyph socket itself. Inside of this one, we put in the spirit glyph. This increases your critical strike damage by an additive amount for every 5 dexterity purchased in the radius, and has an additional bonus that puts a debuff on enemies where every time you get a crit against them, they will take more damage from you, up to 15% at maximum stacks. We take the rare and magic nodes in the radius and grab all the dexterity to actually activate this node too. Then we head out of the left side of the board to reattach to revealing. We do this so that we can cut out a few points that would have been in the middle, and instead we go up through here, up to the glyph socket itself, which is going to be Headhunter. This increases the effect of all normal nodes within the radius, which helps you stack your actual main stats, and it has the secondary effect of a multiplier increase to damage against elites, which is quite important because that's where most of your damage is going to be required for the most part. We take all the dexterity and the rare magic nodes to actually activate this, and this is the end of where I am with my points, except for the fact that we also then stick these few points just to get a bit of extra fire resistance, because fire resistance is one of the holes in our gear, and this does of course help fix it. If you have more points than I do then, I did mention this earlier sort of in passing, but now that you've seen the board it might make a bit more sense. So you can grab the actual magic nodes that are very close within the radius of the different places that we have glyphs like that. Those are 1 point to spend for an extra bit of additive damage, and these all add up if you get a bunch of them. Then once you have a bunch of those, what you want to do is fill out the glyphs that gain more damage, the more stats that you have filled out in the radius, with the priority being the colossal glyph. Adding more strength here gives you a lot more gorilla damage, and the spirit glyph over here, adding in dexterity within this radius, gives you a lot more critical damage, and then the final priority being the headhunter glyph, and especially dexterity within the headhunter radius, just to help us stack more skill damage in general. Then that just about does it for how you actually want to set the build up, so let's talk briefly about how to play it. For the most part, you want to use every ability that you have on cooldown, then spam Payback to do massive damage and refresh the cooldowns. The more intricate version of that concept though involves doing things like making sure to save Vortex until after you press Scourge, so you can make the enemies that you feared get knocked down and pulled on top of you, rather than having them run all around the place and move out of your range. Or doing things like letting go of the Payback button so you can press Vortex and then use your ultimate so that you make sure intricacy pops on Vortex. Because if you hold Payback down when you press the ultimate, you will not get the intricacy procs. It's just an unfortunate interaction of Payback also being a potency skill. So that's how you work around it. You let go of Payback before you press Vortex into the Hunter. Then you can use this to sort of walk up to enemies, press Scourge to start building bonus crowd control damage stacks, Vortex to group the enemies up, then use the Hunter to hop into a further forward pack of enemies, use Vortex to group that second pack up, then use your evade to get back in the middle of the two groups, and then use a third Vortex to mass all of them up into one gigantic pack together that you can just shove Payback into until one of them dies, and the domino effect of the Fell Soothsayer aspect just starts to wreak havoc throughout the whole pack. For bosses, this gets a lot simpler because you just sort of want to hit your abilities on cooldown, and intricacy has far less effect. If a boss summons adds, you do want to make sure that you Vortex them in, so the Soothsayer pops when they die, hit the boss. But that's pretty much it really. Otherwise, just smack things with Payback and have fun, knowing that any time that an enemy hurts you, all it does is make them take even more damage from your abilities, hence the name Payback. That just about does it for today then everyone, our overpowerless Kepaleke Payback build that I like to call the Golden Fist Spiritborn build. I hope you've all enjoyed this then, and I hope you enjoy playing it for yourself too if you try it out. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.